Thanks for checking out this movie review video. So this is for the 1922 horror classic Nosferatu. I've been meaning to get to this film for some time. I know I even said it in a few of my videos that I keep meaning to get to it. So hey, I finally got to it, just like I had finally gotten to The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Now, not that you should necessarily do a comparison because of how old these films are and how fledgling film was at that point, but I would say that I like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari more than Nosferatu. That said, I do think that Nosferatu is very important to watch, if for nothing other than just the historic significance of the film. But there is a lot of interesting stuff in there as well, and obviously I'll end up talking about that during this review. So this film was directed by F.W. Murnau, who also directed The Hunchback and the Dancer, The Haunted Castle, Phantom, and Four Devils. That's just some other horror stuff that he had directed. Written by Henrik Galeen, who also wrote scripts for The Golem and Waxworks, and obviously based on the book Dracula by Bram Stoker. The movie apparently was too much to be handled for Sweden and was actually banned in the country of Sweden until 1972. That's kind of crazy. Until 1972, like this, for 50 years, this film was banned in Sweden. And you know, Sweden's not really a place that you think of banning films and stuff, but I guess way back then they did, and it took them a while to unban it. So Count Orlok, who is the referred to Nosferatu in this film, only blinks once on screen at the end of Act One. Now, I find this very interesting bit of trivia. Which, by the way, there's a lot of trivia about this film because it's so old and because it's so revered for many reasons, and rightfully so. So, if you want a lot of information, there's plenty out there. I just picked out a few choice trivia things, but I think that this blinking thing is very interesting, and it's important for the film too, because one of the most unsettling things about Max Schreck, the guy who played Count Orlok, is his eyes and how wide he keeps his eyes. And it adds to the creepiness, it adds to the villainous nature of the character as he's not blinking. You know, just if I didn't blink, if I just sat here like this for my entire review, it would be unsettling. It would be creepy. I couldn't do that because it would dry the hell out of my eyes. But and that's another thing to get to. That had to be hard for Max Schreck to do, to keep his eyes open that long. Because just watch, and like you can tell when they're the cuts in the film, some of those takes where he's not blinking are pretty long, actually. And just try yourself to hold your eyes open for that long. It's not easy. Like, you literally feel your eyes starting to dry out and you want to blink. So Bram Stoker's widow at the time actually sued, and the original prints were destroyed because of that. The film later ended up being restored via kind of some second generation reels. They kind of cobbled a few of them together. And I believe that the version that's on Shudder, which is where I watched it for this review, it's like three versions, like three extra versions of the film that were cobbled together to make this one film. And in a few instances, you can definitely see where it's different. So yeah, but I thought that was interesting. They obviously did not have consent to do the film based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula, so that's why the lawsuit happened, and then the film was destroyed. A lot of it was, but gladly, I'm glad that it was able to be restored. A different version of the film was released in the United States in the late 90s with a score that was replaced. The score was replaced by music by the band Type O Negative. It was also the film had also been introduced by none other than David Carradine. I thought that was just kind of an interesting thing, kind of like an update to the film for the 90s. I would be interested to see that version just to see how the Type O Negative music would change the tone of the film, because I assume it probably would, at least to some degree. The long overture to start the film is okay. It sets the mood from a musical perspective, and I do think that even though the music is very over the top, you have to expect that, obviously, because of the time frame that this came from and the fact that it's also a silent film. Nobody's talking, so they're just going to go much bigger on the music. And I think the music for the time was really good music, and it worked really well with the film. I do think that the beginning of so much music going on during the beginning overture was a lot. It was much, but you know, I can't really criticize that because they didn't really know better film wise. You know, like I said, film was pretty fledgling at that point in comparison to how long it's been around now. They effectively set up the love between Hooter, and Ellen. I'm just gonna call him. I should call him Hooter. No, I shouldn't. Not when it sounds like that, Hutter. I'm just gonna call him Hutter. Uh, they effectively do set up the love that's between Hutter and Ellen, and obviously that's very important to drive audience. Uh, I guess I was gonna say interest, but I think it's probably more sympathy for both of those characters, and then that kind of drives their investment in the relationship that they have, and also drives the increased fear that the audience experiences when they can see that Orlok is on his way to try and get Ellen. Because as he sees in the picture, he has this beautiful neck that he very creepily and oddly comments on. And we know where that's headed because at that point we've been primed to understand that A, he is a vampire, and B, he does bite necks and suck blood. So we understand that Ellen is in peril. And as the film goes on and he keeps getting closer and closer and closer on his journey, you feel this dread building because you are concerned that Ellen's going to die. And that's because of how the relationship between Ellen and Hutter are set up in the beginning, because Hutter ends up being obviously the main character for this. Nice foreshadowing with Knock telling Hutter he may have to shed a little sweat and blood to make the estate sale to Count Orlok. Obviously, that's because Orlok is looking to move there, and they want to make the sale. And Knock, who is Hutter's boss, who I believe at this point had already been, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but basically under the spell of Orlok through just reading the letter that he sent. That's kind of, at first I didn't really pick up on that, but as the film went on, I was like, oh no, he's acting weird already, I think because he became under the spell of Orlok just from reading the letter he sent. But it is a very interesting little bit of foreshadowing when he says to him, you know, you may have to shed a little sweat and blood to get this deal done. Obviously. And he does, because he gets bit. Ellen's level of concern for Hutter traveling is so severe that it comes off as though she's having a nightmarish vision of what's to come. Now, I say a nightmarish vision because when she talks about her concern, the expression on her face and how she has this kind of long stare that goes off into like nowhere, it seems like she's like in her head. She's having like a day nightmare, not a daydream, but a day nightmare, or a vision. You know, she's having a vision of where things could go and how bad it is. And I think that it's kind of alluded to in a way that she kind of has this extra sense, because later on in the film as well, she has like this nightmare that wakes her up about what's going on with Hutter, and that is what's going on with Hutter. Like, he's actually in danger. So there's this kind of sixth sense that she has that's shown a few times. The appearance of the hyena that is the werewolf is very interesting. I don't really know. I don't know the significance of why there was something about that werewolf, where the bartender was talking about that to Hutter. I assume it was to kind of say that there's this danger outside of establishments like the bar and a place like where Count Orlok is, as kind of a way to keep Hutter inside the building. Not from the perspective of the bartender, but from the perspective of the filmmaker. So you can have like a reason that Hutter wouldn't, you know, run off on his own when he's staying with Count Orlok when he's in danger, because he's been told they're werewolves, and you see this hyena out there, so you know there's danger out there, even when there's danger inside. So that's kind of my thought on that. The origin in literature stating that Nosferatu basically was spawned from the Black Death is a very compelling origin. I don't know why we got away from that, because I believe that's also, I haven't read it, but I believe it is also in Bram Stoker's Dracula, and I think that's very interesting. Obviously, it's born of the time, because of the Black Death being in people's very recent memories, but it's it's just such a compelling and interesting origin for him. It's literally like pestilence coming from the earth and forming this human-like visage, and then going around and trying to more freely spread that pestilence amongst humans because it kind of looks human. And then people are kind of, more apt to let it into their life. It's a very interesting thing there. You wonder how Hutter didn't just turn around as soon as he meets Orlok, but maybe because of the werewolves. He doesn't speak and looks super shifty, and he doesn't keep his cool as he tries to suck the blood off Hutter's cut thumb. That's at their first meal, which looked like a pretty nice spread of food, to be honest. He cuts his thumb where he's cutting like a big hunk of bread off, and then how quickly Orlok is on that and trying to suck the blood. I mean, that would have had me running out, honestly, and taking my chances with the werewolves, to be honest. It really would. You kind of shake your head when Hutter writes about the mosquitoes having bit him side by side, because obviously, as an audience member at that point, you understand Orlok is doing this. Like, it isn't mosquitoes, as he thinks. You have this extra knowledge as an audience member because you're seeing everything that he is not seeing. Not only does Max Schreck's lack of blinking make him more creepy, but he keeps his eyes so wide, and when he walks, he also walks very straight and rigid. I think that's another really cool thing. I know there are a lot of stories that have gone around about how into the character Max Schreck was, and some people saying that he got so deep into it, he started to think he was a vampire in real life. I've heard that type of stuff. I don't know if that's, verifiable or not, but he did an amazing job getting into that character, and it's not just the wide eyes. It's not just the not blinking. It's not just the way he kind of like holds his super long hands, but he walks so upright and so rigid when he moves. It's like he's trying not to bend his limbs at all. And it's most easily recognized at the time when he at night comes into Hutter's bedroom through that kind of archway that's like rounded at the top. And it just like, it frames him in such an interesting way, and he moves through it in such like a rigid and tall way that you really notice it at that point. It's unsettling. And Hutter doesn't find it strange that the selling point for Orlok to buy the building next to his house is his wife's neck. Yes, he sees the picture of his wife and he comments on the neck, and then is just basically like, deal is done now. That neck looks delicious. I just thought that was kind of ridiculous and funny because obviously, Hutter's not too bright in the context of his character in this film. The shot of Orlok's shadow sneaking over Hutter looks really good and gives a nice sense of peril as the shadow engulfs him. I believe that there was actually a portion of written text that's within the film that basically talks about making sure you don't get consumed by the shadow of Nosferatu, basically. So that starts happening, and that kind of insinuates that here comes the bite, here comes the danger of Nosferatu. The creepiest thing about the reveal of Orlok sleeping in the coffin is his gnarled hands. This is another interesting little detail, the fact that they had like these long-ish fingers that look very slender and gross and almost deathly. And certainly would look that way if they're coming after you. It's when Hutter finds him in his coffin in the basement of his estate, and he reveals him, and it's how he's like laying there with the hands. I think actually the hands are kind of down like this. And it's just like how like gnarly and long and disgusting and creepy they look. It does a lot for that scene. The first indication of Orlok's ability to have magical influence over others comes when they mention that Nock has fallen under his spell. So it's at that point that you start to really realize, oh, it's not just a situation where he's going to go around and feed on people's blood. He also has just this ability to kind of, without you seeing him doing it, kind of cast this spell that's kind of like, not even location. I was going to say location specific to a certain amount around him, but it's not, because it's done through Nock reading the letter that he sends in the beginning. So any sort of interaction with him or any sort of proximity to him in any way does that. And I'm wondering if part of it has to do with it being able to like travel through the soil in some sort of way. but it just kind of seems like nobody's safe. Like his spell influence could hit anyone, in essence. The feeding of Orlok is confused with deaths from the plague. I found that also interesting. I really do like the fact that not only, like I was saying before, that you know, Nosferatu being born of the Black Plague is cool, but also the fact that in the film they see what's happening with Nosferatu, but they're being like, oh, it's a Black Death. But it could be the same thing, basically, because if Nosferatu is born of the Black Death, then they're one and the same in essence. So it's the same thing. But they don't know that. Great moment when Orlok raises up from the open coffin in the ship. Once again, everyone on the ship is dying. And this kind of reminds me of the film Life Force. I wonder if that's where Toby Hooper got the idea to do that in the film Life Force, or Dan O'Bannon, who wrote the script for that, of where, the bodies are put onto the ship and then the crew just starts to die, even though they're still like in these cases and they've never gotten up, they've never been awake to people's knowledge, but they're just being like drained. So it's the same thing that's happening on the ship. He doesn't even need to sneak out and bite him, even though maybe he is, it's just not shown on screen. So I thought that was interesting. When Knox starts talking about his master being there, I realized just reading Orlok's letter was enough to put him under his spell, under his control. Yeah, that's the moment that I kind of realized that. And he acts appropriately crazy. He does an outstanding job acting very unhinged and under the control of this maniacal being. Very well done. And, for the time, for 1922, the acting in this is very good, in my opinion. The cursed dirt being a source of vampire power is an interesting aspect that didn't really survive over time. That's another aspect. The whole Black Plague thing. Now we have the cursed dirt being a source of power for vampires. I think it's been done a little bit here and there, but not consistently. I just think that's another interesting aspect of vampire lore that we really should have kept. The Black Death and the source of power coming from the soil. I really think that those should still be around and pretty prominent in vampire lore when it comes to film and books. A good job is done to portray the path of death in the wake of Orlok, and it further builds tension for his potential journey's end to feast on Ellen's blood. Like I was saying, how, you're seeing his journey and you're just seeing the death and destruction as he's carving this path on his way to get to Ellen, who is his ultimate goal. Because I guess to him, it's kind of like when you see like the most delectable looking food item, like a steak or something, and you're like, my goal is to get to that steak. Like, I'm going to do this workout, and I'm going to do all this yard work outside, and I'm going to treat myself at the end by getting to this steak. That's how it is for Nosferatu. He's like, I'm gonna go through this journey. I'm going to take this dirt with me. I'm going to kill people on the way there. And then at the end, I get to treat myself with a nice looking neck to bite. The townsfolk end up being correct that a vampire is causing the plague, but they wrongfully believe it to be Knock. I also like that aspect of the film. I thought that was a really cool twist to it where, nobody even recognizes, for the most part, that Orlok shows up. And maybe that was always a part of Orlok's plan, is to basically take control over Knock and make him seem suspicious and have all suspicion cast on him while he basically snuck into town. And it would make it even easier because he, has a path of death as he's getting there. So really no one's really seeing him, especially because all the people on the ship who are taking him to, I guess it's England or UK at that point. I don't know in 1922 how it was classified either, so you'll have to excuse me on that one. But yeah, I mean, no one sees him because anyone who did see him ends up being dead, basically. So, I mean, they see the aftermath and they're trying to investigate that, but then that's what leads them to Knock because he's acting the way he's acting. So I think that's potentially very genius, an ingenious thing that Orlok does. The town. I just read that literally. Sorry. Orlok finally gets to suck on that neck he wanted, but then gets caught in the sun and vaporizes. So it didn't really make sense to me because he seems like this like great evil mastermind who's driven, to suck blood, and he's been around for a long time and he's very intelligent. But in the end, he sucks the blood and then he dies. It's like he forgot that the sun was going to come up. I don't really understand that whole situation. But maybe you can put it in the comments and let me know maybe I missed something. Maybe I missed something. It's possible. And light extinguishes dark. That is kind of the thing that it leaves with, the old saying that light extinguishes dark, good overcomes bad. Like, that's literally the symbology here, or the symbolism here of, I said symbology because I have a Boondock Saints poster hanging on my wall, and that line in the film, the symbolism, it's the symbolism. Anyway, yeah, the whole thing of good versus evil, dark versus light. Light literally overcomes darkness, which is Nosferatu in the end, and he vaporizes. And I like the smoke after him. So, good film. I'm not gonna rate this film because I think that's what I did for the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. I feel like it's so old. Like, I have no idea how to even be in the mindset of 1922 and understand what film in general was like then and how hard the stuff was to pull off. So I really can't give a rating to it, but like I said, it's an important classic, if for nothing other than just the history, but it is a good film and there's a lot to enjoy there. So it's very, very interesting to watch. I'm glad I finally got to it. I know there are some other older ones that I need to watch and review. I have seen White Zombie before, and I would like to do that at some point. I'm sorry. I've been working today and it's been a long day, but so I'm a little tired. But yeah, so I want to do White Zombie at some point. I saw it some years ago, but I don't remember enough. But I believe that's the film that had the first mention of zombies, and I think it was through Voodoo in that film. But anyway, I digress. Nosferatu, good film. Let's talk about it. Put it in the comments. What are your thoughts on Nosferatu? Is there anything I really missed? Because I'd love to hear other people's thoughts and analysis and opinions on this one. Because I'm not like a huge buff on like really old horror films. So I know some of you watching right now probably are way more knowledgeable than me on that, so you could educate me, and I'm down for that. Do me a quick favor, hit subscribe if you have not already. If you have, thank you very much. If you haven't, do it real quick. It is quick, painless, and costs you no money, and that is your way to repay me if you like this video or any video I've ever done. It literally keeps me motivated when I'm getting new subscribers. I'm not doing this for money. I don't get any money for this. It's just in my little bit of free time I have, this is what I do. So I would appreciate that subscribe. But regardless, I really thank you for taking your time to check out this video. And until next time, keep it brutal.